They were gonna hang her just for being Apache. The noose was ready, until one quiet rancher stepped forward and said, "Not today." What he uncovered next would shake the whole frontier. The rope swayed gently in the warm Arizona breeze, creaking as it hung from the gnarled limb of an old mesquite tree in the center of Coldwater Junction. A crowd had gathered, dusty boots, stern faces, some angry, some uncertain, all turned toward a wooden platform hastily nailed together in the middle of the town square. Beside the noose stood a woman, tall, proud, despite the dirt caking her torn dress and the bruises marring her copper skin. Her hands were bound, but her eyes, dark and steady as midnight, dared anyone to flinch. Her name was Tasana, and she was Apache. "You all know the sentence," barked Sheriff Bill Wayne, voice carrying above the murmurs. "Caught near the burned wagons on Willow Creek. Only survivor. That's more'n enough for me." "But she ain't confessed to nothin'," a younger voice shouted from the crowd, a farmhand, barely 20. "She might be innocent." "Innocent Apaches," Wayne sneered. "Ain't no such thing. Rope'll sort truth from lies." Gasps rustled through the onlookers, but none dared step forward. Coldwater was a town where silence survived longer than protest. That's when the clatter of a horse's hooves broke through the heavy heat. All eyes turned as a single rider appeared from the desert trail, dust trailing his long duster coat, hat pulled low over a sun-weathered face. He rode a stallion black as night, with eyes like flint, and a rifle slung loose across his saddle. The stranger reined in beside the gallows, silence falling like a lid on a coffin. The sheriff frowned. "You lost, friend." The rider looked up slowly. "Name's Elias Carter, and I reckon this woman ain't dying today." The sheriff's hand dropped to his holster and 3 deputies followed suit, fingers twitching near their guns. But Elias Carter didn't flinch. He sat calmly in his saddle, like he'd faced down worse than pistols and posses. "You got a badge I don't see?" Wayne asked, stepping forward. "Nope," Elias said, swinging one leg over and dropping to the ground. His boots hit the dust with a thud that echoed across the square. "But I've got eyes, and what I see here, this ain't justice. This is a lynching." The crowd stirred. Not all were with the sheriff. Some had wives or sisters, and seeing a woman about to be hanged without trial didn't sit easy, Apache or not. Wayne grunted. "This ain't none of your affair, Carter. That woman's Apache, found near the wreck of a wagon party. 6 settlers dead, burned bad. She was the only one still breathing. Draw your own picture." "I've seen that picture before," Elias said, stepping closer to the platform. "Too many times. And every time it ends with a rope around a neck and a guilty man riding free." "You accusing me of something?" the sheriff growled. "I'm accusing you of moving too fast," Elias replied. "That wagon train, you say it was burned? What kind of wounds were on the bodies?" Wayne hesitated. "Arrow wounds. Some hacked up bad." "Were the wheels broken? Oxen taken? What's that got to do with it?" "Everything," Elias said. "Because that don't sound like Apache work. Sounds like someone wants you to think it was." He turned to the crowd now. "How many of you've seen real Apache raids?" "I have. They don't leave survivors. And they sure as hell don't spare one woman." That landed like a stone in the still air. Folks looked at one another. Some nodded, slowly. Elias stepped onto the platform, past a sheriff too stunned to stop him. He knelt beside Tasana, looked her in the eye. "My name's Elias," he said softly. "You speak English?" She stared at him for a moment, then gave the faintest nod. "I'm gonna need your story. The truth." She took a long breath, then spoke, her voice quiet but strong. "I was following the creek, looking for my brother. I saw smoke. I found the wagons already burning. I tried to help a girl, small one. She was alive, but screaming. Then riders came. White men. They hit me, tied me up." Elias stood and turned to the sheriff. "You hear that? White riders. Not Apache. You hang her, and you hang the only witness." Wayne's eyes narrowed. You make a mighty fine case for a man who wasn't there." Elias didn't blink. "Then maybe I best go there. Ride to Willow Creek. Find out who did this. You give me 3 days." The sheriff laughed. 3 days, and she's gone. Vanished. "Then I'll leave you my horse," Elias said, slinging his rifle off. "And my rifle. If I run, you keep 'em." Wayne's mouth opened, then shut. He studied Elias for a moment, jaw grinding. Then he grunted. 3 days. If you ain't back with proof, the rope gets used." Willow Creek wasn't marked on most maps, and Elias Carter knew why before he ever saw it. The trail narrowed into broken stone and scrub, sagebrush clawing at his boots as he hiked the last mile on foot. True to his word, he'd left his horse tied in front of Coldwater's jail. All he carried now was a canteen, a coil of rope, and a bowie knife old enough to remember Santa Anna's last breath. Smoke no longer clung to the sky, but the air still held the ghost of fire. He crested a ridge, and the valley opened below. What was once a hopeful wagon party, 8 wagons, by the look of the scorched wheels, was now a graveyard of blackened wood and twisted iron. Elias crouched low, eyes scanning every shadow. The scene had been quieted by time, but not by peace. He picked his way down, boots crunching through charcoal and broken dreams. Bodies had been removed, likely buried by townsfolk or coyotes, but the signs of death lingered. Blood had seeped into the soil near a rock where a child's doll now lay, its dress scorched, one button eye missing. Elias bent and touched the ground. "No arrows," he muttered. "No tracks leading away in Apache patterns." Instead, he found horseshoes, 2 regular, 2 deep. Soldiers, maybe, or ranch hands, but not warriors. Then something glinted near the creek bed. He made his way there, crouched low. Half buried in the mud was a belt buckle, military issue. Cavalry, but not polished. The leather was cracked and worn, and tucked beneath it, a cartridge casing. Henry rifle, .44 caliber. "That ain't Apache," Elias whispered. He stood slowly, senses sharpening. Something had moved up on the ridge. He wasn't alone. Elias turned toward the sound. Just the faintest crunch of gravel, too careful for an animal. He ducked behind a fallen wagon wheel, eyes scanning the brush above. A shadow shifted, then froze. "Don't bother hiding," he called, voice even. "You had a chance to shoot me clean. Means you want to talk." Silence. Then a voice replied, cracked and low. "Ain't smart coming here, stranger. They don't like folks poking around." "Who's they?" A pause. "The same ones who burned this camp. Wore paint on their faces, but it was just show. Underneath they smelled like tobacco and army soap." Elias's blood chilled. He stepped out slowly, hands visible. On the ridge stood a boy no older than 16. Dirty face, rawhide boots too big for his legs, but his eyes were sharp. "You saw them?" Elias asked. The boy nodded. "I was following them, been tracking them since they came through Miller's Pass." "Why?" "They killed my brother, left him for dead. I'm gonna find every last one of them." Elias met the boy's stare. "Then maybe we help each other. 'Cause if we don't, an innocent woman dies at sundown in 3 days' time." The boy's name was Toby Reddick, son of a trapper, born in the canyons east of Tucson. He'd lived off the land since he could walk, knew how to read tracks better than most scouts twice his age. As the two of them sat around a smokeless fire that night, Elias listened while Toby spoke, quietly, like the desert wind might carry his words to ears they didn't want hearing. "They was dressed like Comanche," Toby said, voice flat. "Face paint, feathers, even had moccasins made right. But their horses? Ain't no native tribe cuts brands into their hides." "Military brands?" Elias asked. Toby nodded. "Fort Sutherland. I seen him before. Pa used to trade meat there." Elias leaned back, eyes narrowed. "So these men are white soldiers, playing Apache? Or deserters?" Toby said. "Either way, someone gave 'em orders." The name hung between them, unspoken but heavy. Lieutenant Harper. Elias had heard it before. Back in Kansas, where Harper was accused of taking justice into his own hands, wiping out a village because he claimed it harbored rebels, no court-martial ever stuck. The army needed men like Harper, ruthless, loyal, willing to do the things no one else would. But Elias knew a butcher when he saw one. Next morning, they rode at first light, heading northeast to Fort Sutherland. The place had been shuttered 6 months earlier after a cholera outbreak, but rumor said Harper had stayed behind, with a few loyal dogs and a reason to keep out of sight. The journey was hard. Dry winds, brittle trails, and eyes that always felt watched. Twice, Elias spotted movement in the distance, but whoever shadowed them kept out of rifle range. Watching. Waiting. By dusk, they reached the outskirts of the abandoned fort. Its wooden palisade still stood, but the gate had fallen, and the place looked half swallowed by dust and thorn brush. It was too quiet. No birds, no horses, just wind. They tethered their mounts low in a dry wash and crept up the slope. From a break in the wall, Elias peered through, and what he saw made his jaw tighten. 6 men sat around a fire inside the yard. One of them wore a blue cavalry coat, its buttons missing, sleeves rolled, but unmistakable. Another cleaned a knife with methodical care, its edge already shining. Then, a woman stepped into the light. Not Tasana, but another native woman, bound at the wrists, her mouth gagged. Toby stiffened beside him. "That's Marnie," he whispered. She's from my village. I thought she was dead." Elias didn't move. He stared at the man in the cavalry coat. Harper, alive, armed, and holding hostages. And now Elias Carter had a name, a face, and the most dangerous decision yet to make. Moonlight spilled across the broken timbers of Fort Sutherland as Elias and Toby slipped through the breach in the wall. Each step was a gamble, boots brushing dry weeds that whispered like old bones. Inside, the 6 men sat relaxed around the fire, rifles nearby but not in hand, too confident, too sure of the silence this ruin offered. The native woman, Marnie, knelt nearby, bound but alert. Her eyes flicked toward the shadows. She'd seen them. Elias crouched low beside the remains of a collapsed storehouse. He could hear the men talking, their voices sharp against the desert hush. "We ride at dawn," one said. "Burn that Navajo camp. Leave just enough behind to blame it on the Apaches again. Harper says the railroad men need another push." "Railroad men?" Toby whispered, lips barely moving. Elias didn't answer. His mind raced. The puzzle was clearer now. Harper was orchestrating attacks to fan the flames of war. Each false raid justified more contracts, more army presence, more control of the territory. And behind it all, someone, maybe back east, was getting rich. But tonight, they had only one goal: get Marnie out. Elias reached into his coat, pulling a small iron spike, silent, deadly in the right hands. "Circle wide," he whispered to Toby. "Create a noise near the corral. 2 will break off. I'll take the others." Toby gave a grim nod and melted into the shadows. Moments later, a crash echoed near the fort's edge, followed by a startled shout. Just as predicted, 2 men rose and rushed toward the sound, rifles in hand. Elias moved. He struck the first from behind, silent and swift, driving the spike into the man's thigh. Not fatal, but enough to drop him. The second turned, but Elias slammed him into a beam, head cracking hard. The others leapt up, too late. Marnie acted faster. She surged up, rope still around her wrists, and kicked the fire, sending sparks into the air and burning embers flying. One man shrieked, clutching his eyes. In the chaos, Elias reached her side, cutting her binds in 2 motions. "Run!" he barked, and she didn't hesitate. They sprinted toward the broken gate as gunfire erupted behind them. 1 shot, 2. A bullet nicked Elias's coat, tearing fabric but missing flesh. Toby appeared from the dark, grabbing Marnie's arm and pulling her down the wash. But as Elias turned to follow, a voice rang out sharp and cold. "Carter!" He froze. Standing in the firelight, revolver raised, was Lieutenant Harper, face like stone, eyes gleaming with recognition. "Should have known it'd be you," Harper growled. "You've always had a thing for lost causes." Elias didn't reply. His knife hung loose in one hand, body ready to lunge or run, but not both. "You walk away now," Harper said, "and I forget I saw you. But you take that woman, you cross me." Elias met his stare. "Then start remembering, Harper." And he ran into the night. The desert gave no mercy. Elias, Toby, and Marnie ran hard through the canyon shadows, chased by curses, hoofbeats, and the promise of vengeance. Behind them, Harper's men thundered like a flood, bullets cracking against stone, spitting sparks into the dusk. They had one advantage. Elias knew these canyons better than most men knew their own dreams. And he was betting his life on a place whispered about in Apache and Navajo circles alike, the Cave of Silent Thunder. They reached it just past midnight, hidden behind a narrow pass that vanished unless you knew where to look. A jagged crack in the redstone wall, barely wide enough for a man on foot. Inside, the air cooled instantly. The silence pressed in, heavy and ancient. Marnie hesitated at the entrance. "This place, it's sacred," she whispered. Elias nodded. "That's why Harper won't follow us in. Superstition's strong in men who pretend they fear nothing." They passed inside. The cave's walls shimmered faintly, streaked with mineral veins and old petroglyphs, symbols of thunderbirds, twin serpents, and dancing spirits. Deeper in, the floor dropped into a basin where cool water pooled from a hidden spring. Here, they stopped to breathe. Toby leaned against the stone, panting. "That man back there, Harper, he's not just a killer, he's hunting something." Elias looked at Marnie. "You said they were going to burn a Navajo camp next?" She nodded slowly. "They've already burned two. They take children, say they're orphans, then sell them east." Toby clenched his jaw. "We need to get back to Coldwater. We need to stop the hanging." Elias turned toward the cave's entrance. "Not yet." A shadow shifted in the far corner of the chamber. Marnie stiffened. Toby reached for his knife, but Elias raised a hand. "Hold." A figure stepped forward. Old, bent, wrapped in a faded blanket. Her eyes caught the starlight, wise and unblinking. She spoke in Apache. Marnie answered, translating softly. "She says she's been waiting, that the girl, Tasana, is not what she seems." Elias frowned. "What do you mean?" The old woman's voice wove through the stone, like wind through canyon grass. "She says Tasana is not alone," Marnie whispered. "She carries something with her, a truth, a curse. And if you save her, the desert will bleed." Elias stared into the flickering firelight, shadows dancing across the petroglyphs. Thunder rumbled faintly outside, though no storm yet stirred. "What truth?" Elias asked. The old woman did not answer, but a sound echoed from the cave's entrance. Distant, metallic, a rifle being cocked. They weren't alone anymore. The rifle's click echoed like thunder in the still cave, and Elias drew his knife instinctively. Toby was already crouched low, eyes toward the entrance. Marnie shielded the old woman with her body. Another sound, boots scuffing stone. Then a voice, slow and familiar. "Carter, you can't hide forever, Harper." He wasn't bluffing this time. The cave's legend might have kept most men out, but Harper wasn't most men. Greed and cruelty had carved out any space left for fear. Elias gestured silently toward a crevice to the left, an ancient ritual shaft carved deep into the earth. He'd only seen one like it before, and it led through the stone like a serpent's burrow. "We take the side passage," he whispered. "It'll loop us to the upper cliffs, but it's tight." Marnie nodded and helped the old woman rise. Toby followed, keeping one eye behind as the first shadows of Harper's men crept closer. Elias was the last to enter, sliding into the narrow slit in the rock. It pressed close, stealing breath and sound. The walls were slick with ancient moisture, etched with carvings so old even time had forgotten their meaning. Halfway through, the tunnel widened into a round chamber, and what they found there stopped them cold. A stone altar, ringed with ash, bones laid out in deliberate shapes, and at the center, a leather pouch no bigger than a man's fist, resting untouched on the altar's heart. The old woman froze, murmuring in Apache. "What is it?" Elias asked, breath tight. Marnie translated, voice trembling. "She says this was buried long ago, sealed to keep peace between nations. It contains names, deeds, a treaty broken by white men, sealed in blood." Toby stepped closer, eyes wide. "So that's what Harper is after?" Elias nodded. "Proof. Real proof. Something worth killing for." Marnie reached for the pouch, but the old woman grabbed her wrist. "She says only Tasana can open it," Marnie whispered. "It's her blood that seals it. She is the descendant of the one who signed." Elias swore under his breath. They couldn't go forward. They couldn't leave it behind. Outside, a voice rang clear through the passage. "I'll give you one chance, Carter," Harper called. "Walk out now, and I'll let the others live." Elias gritted his teeth. "He's lying." "But he knows," Toby said. "He knows about this place, about the pouch." Marnie nodded slowly. "If we let him take it, he won't stop at Coldwater. He'll start a war." Elias stared at the pouch, heart pounding, and knew what had to be done. They climbed through the crevice with dawn bleeding into the sky, like fire over the rim of the earth. The air was cold and thin as they emerged onto the upper cliffs, wind screaming across the ledges like some ancient judge weighing their fate. Elias was the first to crest the ridge, scanning the landscape. Below them sprawled the cracked red valley of Sutherland Basin. Somewhere behind, Harper and his men were threading through the sacred cave hot on their trail, and in Elias's satchel, the pouch. The thing pulsed like it had a heartbeat. Whatever power it held wasn't just symbolic. It had weight, history, secrets older than the war-torn flags most men saluted. Marnie clutched the old woman's hand, helping her over a jagged rock. Toby stepped to Elias's side. "We can make it to the dry wash by sundown if we ride hard," he said. "If we reach the Navajo camp near Coyote Ridge, maybe." A gunshot split the silence. Stone burst near Toby's feet. They ducked low. "Sniper," Elias hissed. "Long rifle. He's close." Another shot, this one clipping a ledge above Marnie's head. Dust rained down, but she didn't flinch. Elias scanned the bluff below. Then he saw him. Harper, standing bold as sin on the spine of a rock shelf, his rifle held loose in one hand, the rising sun behind him like a halo of fire. His men were fanning out, forming a pincer, and in his other hand, something Elias hadn't expected, Tasana. She was bound, her face bloodied, her eyes blazing defiance even as Harper jerked her forward. "Trade!" Harper shouted. "The pouch for the girl, one Apache for another." Elias's blood went cold. "How?" Toby breathed. "How'd he find her?" "They never intended a hanging," Elias growled. "She was bait, just like the others." Harper's voice rang again. "You've got 10 seconds, or I drop her over the edge." Marnie turned to Elias, fury in her eyes. "We give him that pouch, it all starts again. Massacres, retaliation, cities burned. But if we don't," Toby said, "he kills her. And Coldwater won't listen without her testimony." Elias felt the weight of it, the impossible choice. In his left hand, history. In his right, a girl whose life now stood between peace and bloodshed. Wind howled through the canyon like the voice of some forgotten god. And Elias Carter knew there would be no clean ending, only sacrifice. 10 seconds! Harper bellowed from the ledge. The canyon swallowed his voice and hurled it back like thunder. Elias stood frozen, the pouch heavy in his palm, Tasana teetering on the brink of death. Her dark eyes locked with his, steady, unafraid. as if she'd already accepted her fate. "Elias," Marnie said quietly, "if we give him that pouch, more will die than just her." "And if we don't," Toby snapped, "she dies now." Elias took a breath. Deep, raw, final. Then he stepped forward, pouch held high in one hand, the other lifted in peace. "I'm coming down," he shouted. "You let her go, I'll bring it to you." Harper smiled like the devil at a church picnic. "Smart choice." Elias made it halfway down the trail when he stopped cold, because Tasana moved. With a sudden twist, she slammed her head backward into Harper's nose. He howled, stumbled, blood spraying. She dropped, rolled toward the cliff edge. Harper raised his pistol. Elias didn't hesitate. He threw the pouch, high, arcing toward the edge of the cliff like a blazing comet. Harper's eyes tracked it instinctively. And in that second, Toby fired. The boy's aim was true. The shot caught Harper's shoulder, spinning him around. His pistol fired wild, echoing into the sky. Tasana rolled free, tumbling into Elias's arms as he caught her just feet from the drop. The pouch hit the dust near Harper's feet. The men froze. Wind whipped across the stone. Then Tasana stood, slowly, deliberately, and spoke. "I am the daughter of Wakasato, who signed the first treaty beneath the Black Mesa. My name is written in his blood. This pouch is mine by birthright." She walked toward Harper, not with fear, but with purpose. "And I will open it before the people. Not here, not for you." Harper, stunned, stumbled back as Elias stepped between them. "You've lost," Elias said. "They'll hang you for this." Harper's face twisted in a snarl. "Not if I bury the truth with you." He reached for his pistol, but too late. Marnie's knife flew from her hand and struck the barrel, knocking it loose. And Tasana, without hesitation, grabbed the pouch and held it aloft. It opened in her hands. A scroll unfurled, yellowed, stained with old blood, but still legible. Names, landmarks, army signatures. A deal broken. A nation betrayed. Harper paled. "You don't know what you've done." "No," Tasana said, her voice quiet and deadly. "You don't." They rode hard through the night, the stars burning above like 1,000 watchful eyes. Elias led the way, Tasana behind him, her arms clutching the pouch like it was the last living part of her family. Toby and Marnie flanked them, rifles ready, eyes sharp. No one spoke, not until the lanterns of cold water flickered on the horizon. "Think they'll believe us?" Toby asked, breaking the silence. "They'll have to," Elias muttered. "We've got proof now. Paper, names, signatures, and the girl they tried to hang." But Tasana said nothing. Her gaze was far away, locked on something only she could see. By sunrise, they were riding into town. The streets were empty but watched. Curtains twitched. Doors cracked open. And at the far end of Main Street, in front of the sheriff's office, stood the gallows. Still there, still waiting. Sheriff Wayne stepped onto the boardwalk, flanked by Deputy Mays and a preacher with sweat on his collar. Behind them, Judge Fletcher emerged from the hotel, brushing sleep from his eyes and suspicion from his face. "Well, now," Wayne said, arms folded, "look what the desert dragged in." "I told you 3 days," Elias said, swinging off his horse. "You told me a lot of things," the sheriff replied, "but that don't change the charges. She was found near a massacre, Carter." "She was framed," Elias snapped, "by men wearing cavalry coats and war paint. We've got a name. Lieutenant Harper? And we've got this." He held up the open pouch, the scroll fluttering in the morning breeze. Wayne frowned, but Fletcher stepped forward, adjusting his spectacles. "What am I looking at?" "Treaty signed under the Black Mesa Accord," Elias explained. "Names of the soldiers who broke it. Proof the raids were staged to justify land grabs and wipe out settlements." Tasana stepped up, her voice clear. "My grandfather's blood sealed it. His mark is here. And mine now rests beside it." Wayne's eyes narrowed. This ain't legal, but it's true. the preacher said softly, stepping forward. I remember that name. Wikasa To. My pa was at the signing. The crowd gathered now, dozens of townsfolk, drawn from their homes by the sound of something rare, truth, and tension. Judge Fletcher turned slowly. Sheriff, release your prisoner. Wayne hesitated, his fingers twitching near his belt. Mays moved first, drawing his keys, unlocking the jailhouse door behind him. But Wayne didn't move. Then Elias saw it. Something in the sheriff's eyes. Not confusion, not anger, fear. You knew, Elias said low. Didn't you? You knew what Harper was doing. You kept that rope ready, not for justice, but silence. Wayne's hand dropped to his revolver, and suddenly, all of Coldwater held its breath. Wayne's hand hovered near his holster, his eyes locked on Elias, like a man backed into a corner with nothing left but violence. You think you're some kind of hero, Carter? He hissed. You don't understand what's at stake. I understand plenty, Elias replied, steady as stone. You were gonna hang an innocent woman to protect a lie. That's all I need to know. The wind stirred the dust in the street. A church bell clanged softly in the distance. 1, 2, the hour of reckoning. Then the sheriff drew. But Elias was faster. The shot cracked like a thunderclap. Wayne's pistol flew from his hand, clattering onto the planks as he stumbled backward, clutching a bleeding forearm. Toby, Marnie, and half the town had drawn their weapons before the echo faded. Stand down, Judge Fletcher shouted, stepping between them. Enough! But Tasana stepped forward now, holding up the open scroll for all to see. This is the truth, she said, her voice rising. This paper was signed in good faith and broken in betrayal. And this man, she pointed at Wayne, was ready to kill me to keep it buried. Wayne glared at her, blood dripping from his sleeve. I did what I was told, he spat. By who? Elias asked, voice like gravel. Harper? Or someone closer? The sheriff's silence answered for him, and slowly, all eyes turned to the judge. Fletcher raised both hands, laughing bitterly. This is absurd! You think I'd risk my career for land grabs and Indian politics? You didn't risk it, Elias said. You bet on it. You signed the rail contracts, didn't you? Sold the land before the treaty was ever broken. The judge's jaw tightened. Tasana's voice cut through the tension. My grandfather met you once. Said you smiled with your mouth, but never with your eyes. Fletcher paled. A woman in the crowd shouted, Is it true, Judge? Another, Did you know about the killings? The crowd surged. Rumors turned to anger like dry brush to fire. Elias stepped forward. I suggest you surrender peacefully, Judge, before this town forgets the meaning of trials and remembers the feel of rope. Fletcher looked at Wayne, then at the scroll. Then he turned slowly and ran. But Toby was ready. He tackled the old man hard, bringing him down in a cloud of dust. The judge kicked, cursed, but it was no use. Deputy Mays cuffed both Fletcher and Wayne, his face pale but resolute. I ain't dying for either of you, he muttered. Elias turned to Tasana. It's over, but she shook her head slowly. No, this part is. Her eyes drifted east, toward the horizon. But there's still another secret waiting. One the desert never let go. The dust hadn't yet settled in Coldwater Junction when the rider came. He wasn't part of the crowd. No one saw him arrive. One moment the town square was murmuring with the echoes of justice. The next, a lone figure stood at the edge of the gallows, horse snorting steam into the early morning air. Black coat. No badge. No name. But the look in his eyes told Elias everything he needed to know. Trouble had a new face. Tasana stiffened beside Elias, her fingers brushing the scroll like it could still shield her. He's not from here, she whispered. No, Elias muttered, watching the man dismount. He's from farther east. Railroad country. Government shadows. The stranger walked slow, deliberate, boots crunching over old bloodstains and broken lies. He stopped before them and tipped his hat, more insult than greeting. "You, Carter?" he asked, voice like river rocks tumbling in a barrel. "I am." The man's eyes flicked to Tasana. "Then you've got something that don't belong to you." Elias smiled without humor. "If you mean the truth, then no. It belongs to all of us." The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'm here for the girl." "You're late," Elias said. "They already tried hanging her. Didn't take. This ain't a hanging, it's cleanup." That word sent a chill through the air. Several townsfolk backed away. Even Deputy Mays instinctively stepped between the stranger and the prisoners now cuffed on the porch. "You think this town's gonna let you take her?" Marnie asked, voice like flint. "I don't need the town," the man replied, revealing the letter tucked in his coat, signed by the territorial governor. "Authority to seize any witness in the interest of national security." Toby read the paper aloud. "Authorization to extract hostile persons of interest." He looked up, pale. "It's legal." "Legal don't mean right," Elias growled. But the man was already moving, stepping toward Tasana. Elias blocked his path. "You take one more step, and we see how fast you draw." The stranger paused, studying him like a man might study a bear trap. Then, slowly, he smiled again. "You think this ends here? This is just the fuse, Carter. The real fire's buried under the Black Mesa. And if she opens that vault," he turned back to his horse, "you'll wish you let her hang." He rode off without another word. Silence hung heavy in his wake. Tasana looked at Elias. "There's something under the mesa. My grandfather tried to keep it buried." "What is it?" Toby asked. She hesitated, then said softly, "Not just names, not just land." She looked east again. "A weapon." The trail to Black Mesa wasn't marked on any map. It ran through dry riverbeds and ancient canyons, where even the wind had forgotten how to whisper. Only those with native blood or iron resolve ever found their way. Elias Carter had both, at least enough to follow Tasana. They rode in silence for most of the day, the dust rising behind them like old ghosts. Marnie and Toby followed at a distance, watching the horizon, scanning every ridge for riders. The man from the east had said this was the fuse. Now Elias could feel it. Every hoofbeat closer to the mesa tightened the knot in his chest. He'd seen war. He'd seen men lie and kill for gold, land, pride. But this was different. "What exactly is buried there?" he asked finally. Tasana's eyes didn't leave the trail. "Before the treaty, before the railroad men came, my grandfather and others found something in the stone. Not gold, not silver. Something older. Like a mine?" She shook her head. "Like a vault, sealed with iron. It was built long before settlers came, Spanish maybe, or older still. My people left it alone, but the U.S. Army found it." "And they opened it?" Elias asked. "No, they couldn't. Not without the key, not without the blood." Elias narrowed his eyes. "You mean yours?" Tasana reached into her satchel and pulled the scroll again. "This isn't just a treaty. It's a map. The symbols here match carvings on the mesa. And this," she tapped a red stamp at the corner, "is a seal. My grandfather's mark. It unlocks the vault." Toby rode up beside them. "If the army never opened it, why send men now?" "Because Harper tried," Tasana said. "He failed. And when he failed, he lied. He needed to create war to hide the truth." Marnie added, "And if someone from Washington is here now, that means they believe it's real. And worse, they think she's going to succeed where they couldn't." The mesa rose in the distance now, black and flat-topped like a sleeping giant. Thunderheads gathered above it, though no storm had been forecast. Elias narrowed his eyes. "We make camp tonight," he said. "We move at dawn, and we pray that vault holds more answers than bullets." But as they reached the base of the mesa, a chill swept through the rocks. On the trail ahead, marked into the dirt with rifle butts, was a message. "Turn back, or be buried." The wind howled around Black Mesa like it was mourning something already lost. Campfires burned low beneath the cliffs, casting long shadows as Elias, Tasana, Marnie, and Toby stood before the stone path that wound upward into the heart of the rock. The message in the dirt behind them had been clear: turn back or be buried. But they didn't. By dawn, they began their climb. Silent, focused, knowing eyes watched from somewhere behind. The entrance wasn't natural. A slab of cut stone leaned against the mesa wall, half buried in dust and time. Tasana ran her fingers across the faded carvings. Thunderbirds, serpent trails, stars in patterns only her ancestors could read. "This is it," she whispered. "This is where the seal fits." She pulled the scroll, careful not to tear the brittle edge. At the bottom, embedded in wax darkened by age, was the mark, her grandfather's signet. She pressed it into a carved indent in the wall. The stone groaned. Dust shook loose. Then, slowly, impossibly, the wall shifted. A hidden door cracked open, revealing a passage chiseled deep into the earth. It smelled of old earth, dry blood, and something else, like rusted iron and lightning. They entered, torches lit, footsteps echoing like whispers across centuries. The tunnel led downward, deeper and deeper, until the air turned cold. At its end stood a massive iron door, ringed with unfamiliar markings. Some Apache, some Spanish, and others far older. Tasana stepped forward. "I can feel it," she said. "Something, watching." Marnie placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's just the past, trying to be remembered." They pushed the door. It didn't budge. Then Elias noticed the grooves. 4 of them. 4 hands, he murmured. "It needs trust." Without hesitation, each of them, Elias, Tasana, Toby, Marnie, placed a hand on the grooves. The vault door hissed. It swung inward. Inside was no gold, no weapons, but a circle of stone tablets, and in their center, a sarcophagus made of metal, not wood or rock. Toby swallowed. "What the hell is that?" Elias stepped closer. Carved into the metal lid was a phrase in Spanish and Apache side by side: "Let no man wake the fire that sleeps." Then a sound echoed from above. Boots on stone. Riders were coming. The stone chamber seemed to breathe around them, cold air rising from cracks beneath the sarcophagus like it had a pulse. Elias's fingers hovered over the lid, unsure if lifting it would bring salvation or ruin. Outside, the echo of boots quickened. The passage they'd come down wasn't empty anymore. "They're coming," Toby hissed. He cocked his rifle, eyes darting to the door. "We ain't got much time." Tasana knelt beside the sarcophagus, brushing her fingers over the dual-language inscription again. "My grandfather told me the fire wasn't just a warning, it was a choice." Marnie's brow furrowed. "What's inside?" Tasana didn't answer right away. Then she said, "A weapon, not made of steel, made of knowledge, of memory." Elias turned to her. "Memory can be deadlier than bullets." "Exactly," she said. "That's why they wanted it buried." The footsteps were close now, shouts echoing down the corridor. "Carter!" a voice called. It wasn't Harper. It was the man from the east. "You open that coffin, and you start a war." Elias looked at the others. "War's already here," he said. Then he placed both hands on the lid and lifted. It moved, heavy as sin, cold as a grave. Inside wasn't a body. It was a chest, locked, engraved with the same symbols as the scroll. Elias reached for it. The chest clicked open. Inside lay a thick, weathered book. Its leather cover was cracked, but its pages were wrapped in oilcloth, sealed with wax and bone. Tasana reached out. "That's the ledger." "The what?" Toby asked. "The real treaty," she whispered. "The one before Washington rewrote it. Land agreements, names, witnesses, a complete record. And evidence," Elias added, scanning the pages, "of every betrayal since." Gunfire erupted at the chamber's entrance. A bullet struck stone, shattering fragments across the floor. "Take cover!" Marnie yelled, dragging Tasana behind the sarcophagus. Elias raised his rifle and fired, sending the first attacker sprawling. Shadows poured into the room, Harper's men masked and merciless. But Elias, Toby, and Marnie weren't alone anymore. From the passage behind, new war cries rose, deep, echoing, fierce. The Navajo had come. Elias ducked as the firefight exploded in the chamber, flames from torches throwing dancing light across stone and steel. In the chaos, Tasana clutched the book to her chest. "We can't lose this," she said. Elias nodded. "Then we don't run." He turned toward the fight, eyes hard. "We end this. Here. Now." Smoke choked the chamber as bullets cracked and ricocheted off ancient stone. Shadows danced across the walls, men fighting not just for land or power, but for the story of the West itself. Elias Carter crouched behind the sarcophagus, his rifle barking fire and thunder. Across the chamber, Marnie dragged a wounded Toby to cover, his shoulder bleeding but his aim still sharp. "They're flanking!" Marnie shouted. Elias saw it too, two mercenaries circling wide, trying to corner them near the vault's back wall. He fired once, taking one down, but the other kept coming, mean and fast. Then a howl echoed through the chamber, a war cry that hadn't been heard in generations. From the tunnel behind, warriors emerged, Navajo, armed with bows, blades, and ancient fury. They swept into the fight like a desert wind, flanking the mercenaries, striking with precision and purpose. The tide turned fast. The man from the east, his coat now torn and dusty, emerged from the fray, eyes locked on Tasana. She stood behind the sarcophagus, the ancient ledger clutched tight in her arms. He raised his pistol. "I warned you," he growled. "You should have let her hang." Elias moved to intercept, but he was too far. The shot rang out, but it never reached Tasana. The old woman, silent, forgotten, cloaked in shadows, stepped in front of her. The bullet struck her in the chest. She crumpled silently. "No!" Tasana cried, falling to her knees beside her. The man raised his gun again, cold, mechanical. But this time, Elias was there. He tackled him hard, the two of them crashing into the stone floor. The pistol skidded away. They fought in silence, two men gritting and clawing at a place too sacred for either of them to belong. Elias finally pinned him. "You tried to bury history," he spat, "but it remembered you." And with that, he slammed the man's head against the stone. Just once. Enough. The gunfire ceased. One by one, the last of Harper's mercenaries surrendered or fled, disappearing into the desert night. Silence returned. Tasana held the old woman's hand, tears falling freely. "She knew," she whispered. "She knew she wouldn't leave this place." Elias approached, battered and bloodied. "She gave us a future." Marnie lifted the ancient ledger. "We bring this to Coldwater. Let the people see. Let the world know." Tasana stood, steady now. "Then we rebuild. Not just a town, a truth." Elias looked toward the tunnel, toward dawn breaking above the mesa. "Let's go finish what we started." They rode into Coldwater Junction like ghosts returning from the grave, dusty, scarred, and carrying something no army or railroad could silence. The truth. The town looked different now, not in its buildings or its streets, but in its eyes. The folks who once watched with suspicion now stepped forward with something else. Curiosity, guilt, and maybe hope. Deputy Mays was the first to meet them. He took one look at the battered group, the sacred ledger wrapped in oilcloth, and gave a slow nod. "You bring in justice," he said, "or a firestorm?" "Both," Elias replied. The courthouse filled faster than a saloon on payday. Fletcher and Wayne sat cuffed near the back, silent and small in the shadow of what was coming. The preacher sat near the front, hands folded, eyes fixed on Tasana. She stood in the center with Marnie beside her, the ledger open on the judge's bench. One by one, the pages turned. Names, deeds, treaty violations, payments made in gold and betrayal, signatures of army officers who'd long since died, and signatures still active in Washington. Every page was a blade, cutting through the silence. "They sold our land," Tasana said, voice steady. "Then they sent killers to burn our homes and call it justice. They hanged our fathers and named it peace." She looked to Elias. He stepped forward. "The men who did this tried to bury the truth, with rope, with bullets, with fire. But truth ain't kindling. You can't burn it out forever." Murmurs filled the room, some shocked, others furious. The preacher rose. "I was a boy when that first treaty was signed," he said. "I remember Wakasato." He shook my father's hand. "I remember a promise, and I remember the day they broke it." Then he turned to the crowd. "This ledger is proof, and it demands justice." Fletcher stood suddenly, voice shaking. "You'll tear this town apart. You'll destroy what we built." "No," Elias said. "We'll finally build it right." Mays stepped forward, keys in hand. "By order of the people of Coldwater Junction," he said, "I place you both under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder." He snapped the cuffs tighter. As the prisoners were led away, the people didn't cheer. They watched. Silent. Changed. Outside, the sky was clear. The desert wind was still. Tasana turned to Elias. "You didn't have to help me." "I didn't," he said. "I helped the truth." She smiled, just a little. "Then maybe there's hope for this land yet." The sun rose slow over Coldwater Junction, casting long shadows across the gallows that now stood empty, its rope cut and coiled like a forgotten snake. Elias Carter stood near the edge of town, his saddlebag packed, his horse already restless beneath him. The town had changed, but not enough to keep a man like him. He wasn't made for roots. Toby limped up, his shoulder bandaged, eyes clear despite the bruises. "You sure you won't stay?" he asked. "They're talking about forming a town council. Folks want you on it." Elias shook his head. "I ain't the kind that sits behind desks. I fix what needs fixin'. Then I ride." Marnie joined them, handing Elias a wrapped parcel. "Biscuits. And coffee grounds. You may be stubborn, but I ain't letting you go hungry." Elias smiled faintly. "Kind of you." Then Tasana approached. She carried the ledger, now sealed and tied in leather. "We'll send copies east," she said. "To every paper, every official we can reach. But we're keeping the original here." She placed it into the hands of a young girl, a student from the mission school. "Let the next generation guard the truth." Elias nodded. "You'll do fine, Tasana." "Better than fine." She hesitated, then reached into her satchel. From it, she pulled the old bone seal, her grandfather's mark. "I want you to have this," she said, placing it in Elias's hand. "It only opens doors meant for those who fight for what's right." He looked down at the smooth, carved bone, so small and so heavy with meaning. "I'll carry it," he said quietly. "And if I ever find a place that needs its door kicked open, I'll know it's time." The townsfolk gathered now, not to say goodbye, but to bear witness. To a man who arrived with no promise and left behind a truth that changed everything. Elias mounted his horse. One last time he looked back. "Keep that gallows empty," he said. "Justice don't need a rope. It needs memory." Then he turned, spurred his horse, and rode west. Into the sun. Into legend. 3 days' ride west. Across scorched plains and forgotten trails, Elias Carter passed into territory where maps grew vague and waterholes vanished like dreams. The land here was harsher, older. He passed an abandoned camp once used by railroad scouts, burned to cinders, nothing left but twisted iron rails and a rusted U.S. Army plate half buried in the dirt. A buzzard circled overhead, silent as a secret. Elias dismounted to study the tracks. Recent, boot prints, heavy and military, not cavalry but organized. Then he found it. A satchel, half buried beneath charred canvas. Inside, a single folded paper. A letter, stamped with the seal of the War Department, He read it slow. Phase 2 authorized. Vault extraction successful in secondary site. Continue suppression protocol. Target, Tisana. Elias's jaw clenched. She wasn't safe. The truth they uncovered at Black Mesa wasn't the only vault. And somewhere, someone had already opened another. Quietly, without witness. He turned to his horse, tightening the saddle. This wasn't over. The ledger had started something. A reckoning not yet finished. Behind him, the wind carried a sound. Hooves in the distance. He mounted fast, rifle across his back, eyes scanning the horizon. Then, like smoke on the ridge, a rider appeared. Black coat. No insignia, but familiar in posture. Another one of them. Elias didn't wait. He rode. Fast. Hard. Because Coldwater Junction may have found its peace, but the West had more than one ghost to bury. The town was called Ash Hollow, a speck of wood and dust where the prairie bled into the mountains. Elias Carter hadn't seen it in 12 years. It was where his first trail ended. And now, it would be where his last one did too. He rode in at dusk, the sun spilling gold across the rooftops. Men stared from behind barrels and shutters. Something about Ash Hollow had changed. It wasn't just the silence, it was the fear beneath it. Elias tethered his horse outside the old chapel, now boarded up. He stepped inside the saloon, where the piano hadn't played in a decade. The bartender looked up. "Carter," he muttered. "You still chase ghosts?" "Only the ones that still ride," Elias said. He laid the War Department letter on the bar. The man paled. "He's upstairs," he whispered. "Waiting." Elias climbed slow, each step like thunder. At the top, the door was open. Inside sat a man in a black coat. Older now, but unmistakable. Lieutenant Harper. Alive, smiling. "You thought Black Mesa was the end?" Harper asked. "That little girl and her ledger could stop what we built?" Elias didn't speak. "I let you live back then," Harper said, rising, "because you were too noble to matter. But now, you've become a legend, and legends inspire." He stepped close. "That ledger? It was a decoy. The real vault? Already stripped clean. Artifacts, maps, weapons." Elias's hand hovered near his gun. "Then why am I still breathing?" "Because I want you to see it burn," Harper said. "Ash Hollow is the fuse." Down below, men were lighting torches, gathering barrels, oil, powder, hate. Elias moved. The fight was brutal. Up close, no tricks, no time for second shots. They crashed through the window, tumbling onto the street below in a storm of fists and flame. The townsfolk scattered. Toby was suddenly there, rifle in hand, firing into the chaos. Marnie appeared from the chapel, leading women and children out the back. Tisana rode in from the ridge, ledger in hand, held high for all to see. Harper reached for a pistol, but Elias was faster. Not with bullets, with truth. "You tried to erase her," he said, pointing to Tisana. "But now she carries what you never could, justice." The crowd turned. The torches fell. And the fire Harper had promised? It never came. Instead, Ash Hollow lit up not with flame, but with voices. Angry, rising, righteous. Harper fell silent, and Elias Carter turned his back on him. Because this time, the people carried the justice. And legends? They walked away.